Thank you. And Daphne says Charlottesville is a beautiful area, and that is correct. It's gorgeous here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be at Content Strategy Seattle. I've been following this group for a long time. I know you all have been around for a while, and really appreciate everything that you all do to advance the field of content strategy. Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen. I'm going to try to do it correctly. So let's see here. Okay, there should be a purple slide now. Okay. Okay, great. So, couple months ago, I wrote a book called Managing Content Design Teams. And I don't have a giveaway. I wish I were smart like Tori and I would have figured out how to do that, but I'm not smart like Tori. Tori's really smart. So, um, but all that to say that this talk tonight is going to be sort of a sampling of topics on managing content designers. And the through line is I'm really interested in collaboration. I'm interested in cross-functional collaboration and collaboration within the design team and how content designers are sort of like can serve as the linchpin for that because I really believe that collaboration is the key to designing and shipping useful usable products. So let's get into it a little bit. Okay, so this is me. You already know that I work at PayPal. I live in Charlottesville, and I've worked in content and UX for a while. So it's nice to meet you. Okay, so here's what I want to talk about tonight. First, I want to cover why content design is important, and then want to talk about hiring content designers in a collaborative fashion who are well positioned to collaborate on the team. A collaborative design sprint, how the content designer works with their peers on the design team, how to structure a collaborative team, and then I want to talk about AI. And that doesn't really have a tie into collaboration. It's just there because we have to talk about it. So first, why content design is important. So I know we're all content people here. And by the way, my focus is primarily on product content design, apps, but also websites I think can be considered products. So content design for any digital product. The reason why I'm talking to a bunch of content designers about why what we do is important is because it took me a really long time to understand, I think, the value of our practice and the true value that content designers bring to the product organization or the tech organization. And I thought, you all probably know this, but just in case there's anyone new here, maybe I can sort of like share some data points and, you might take less time than I did to really understand the true value of content design. So I'm going to tell you a story, and the names in this story have been changed to protect the victims of poorly designed software. So as a manager on Citibank's operations team, Sanjay's first order of business on August 12, 2020, was to review his team's work for the previous day. His team's job was to process credits and debits to their clients' accounts, and Sanjay needed to ensure there were no discrepancies. But as he began to examine the transactions, he could tell something was not right. The day before, his team had received instructions to pay $7.8 million in interest on a loan taken out by Citibank's client, Revlon. Instead, Sanjay found that his employer, Citibank, had accidentally paid off Revlon's entire loan early, a total of $894 million. It couldn't be an accident, could it? At Citibank, one of the largest banks in the world, accidents of this magnitude simply didn't happen. For one thing, Citibank's 6 Eyes protocol had been put in place to prevent even the smallest mistake in transferring funds. According to that policy, one team member, in this case Faraj, one of Sanjay's direct reports, entered the transfer into Oracle FlexCube, the application Citibank's operations team used for transfers like this. And this is what the screen looked like when he did that. Then a second pair of eyes, in this case Sanjay's, reviewed the transaction in FlexCube. Finally, another Citibank manager named Scott in Delaware reviewed the transaction as well. So in FlexCube, the best way to make an interest payment like this was to transfer the entire loan amount, sending the principal to an internal Citibank account and the interest to an external lender account. When they looked at the FlexCube screen, the Citibank team saw that the principal field was checked and the internal account number entered correctly. So to them, that signaled that FlexCube was to send the principal amount to the internal Citibank account. When Sanjay tried to proceed with the transaction, FlexCube flashed a warning. It said, account used as wire, account and funds will be sent out of the bank. Do you want to continue? Yes, no. This didn't raise any alarms because while the principal was being sent to the internal account, the interest payment was going to the lenders, so he clicked yes to finalize the transaction. So why was the internal Citibank account missing almost $1 billion? Could it have been caused by a computer bug? That was our first thought. Sanjay, Viraj, and Scott eventually discovered that FlexCube required entries in 2 more fields in order to send the principal amount to the internal account. So by leaving those fields unchecked and empty, the team had inadvertently told FlexCube to send the entire principal amount, not just the interest, directly to the lenders. A 2-year legal battle ensued. Citibank asked Revlon's lenders to return the erroneous payment, and the bank got about $500 million back right away. But several lenders resisted. It would be 2 years before Citibank would reach an agreement with the Revlon lenders to get the money back. By that time, Citibank had paid an undisclosed amount in legal fees, and U.S. bank regulators had fined them $400 million for longstanding deficiencies in their risk management and other processes. In the wake of the ordeal, the Citibank CEO resigned. In court, Scott said that after Sanjay had discovered the mistake and alerted him, quote, I accepted that the mistake had not been caused by any sort of glitch, but rather by human error, and that I was one of the humans responsible for the error. I think he's only half right, though. The FlexCube debacle was the result of human error, but Scott was not the human who caused the error. Oracle caused the error by designing FlexCube so badly. So why did they do this? And to understand this, I want to talk a little bit about my view of how tech companies start and build their teams. So how tech companies start, a software engineer or group of them creates a product. They're fortunate enough to find product market fit. People want to pay money for something they made, which is really exciting. So now they have a company. And it just so happens that since this company was founded by people who write code, and since the product that brings in money is something that those engineers made with coding skills, the company is focused around engineering. Pretty soon, a few things happen. The engineers realize they aren't great at designing interfaces, or they don't want to spend their time that way, so they hire a designer. They value the visual designer as a specialist who makes things look nice, but not as a strategic thinker. But over time, as the design work grows, the design team does too. They grow in numbers as well as influence. As they begin to have a more informed point of view about the product strategy, they may begin to influence the business and product at a deeper level. Then a few more things happen. The designers realize they aren't great at writing content, or they don't want to spend their time writing, so they hire a content designer. They value the content designer as a specialist who makes things sound good, but not as a strategic thinker. As a result, the content designer doesn't have much influence over the roadmap, staffing, and organizing work. So this pattern plays out in tech companies over and over. Why? Because what typically prompted that little engineering team to hire its first designer was the feeling that they needed help making the product look a certain way. That's why they didn't hire a content designer first. They hired a visual designer or visually skilled UX designer to create mock-ups. I think it's time for the tech industry to reject this visual first mindset. We need to recognize that content actually matters more than visuals. A digital product is worthless if it looks good, but no one can understand what they're supposed to do with it. And a product delivers more value as a way to communicate with users than it does as a visual artifact. Prioritizing visual design over content is a holdover from the early days of tech, the result of a startup's first impulse being to make the product look better. In reality, content design and visual design should never be separated. Each product team should have at least one dedicated content designer. That's my opinion. So when I worked at Indeed, I surveyed 61 of my colleagues who were product managers, designers, and researchers to find out how much value did they think they got out of working with a content designer. And when I asked them how working with a content designer affects the quality of the solutions that they deliver, 69% of respondents gave a rating of 5, which indicated they deliver much higher quality with a content designer on the team than without. And it was an anonymous survey, so I don't think they were hopefully they weren't just saying that because they thought I wanted to hear it, but they actually were anonymous, and they did provide a lot of verbatims to explain why they felt that way. As for data from outside of Indeed, there are a lot of case studies that prove the value of content design. So a few examples. Facebook's first content strategist, Sarah Kinsella, reported a content change that resulted in a 56% increase in traffic. Sarah Winters, founder of Content Design London, reported a content change for the UK government that increased task completion by 88%. When she was director of content design at Microsoft, Kylie Hansen, who you may know, reported that content design solved 44% of task failures and increased usability by 92%, as well as increasing active users and retention. And Expedia removed an unnecessary form field and gained $12 million in revenue. So now that we've established some data about why it's important to include a content designer on the team, let's talk a little bit about how to hire content designers. Okay. So before you hire a content designer, recognizing that your team needs a skilled content designer is the first step to setting up your new hire for success. But not every team that asks for a content designer is necessarily ready for one. Although they may recognize the need, many product managers and designers don't understand how content designers need to work. They think of a content designer as a service provider, someone who comes in after design has happened, adds copy or polishes copy, and goes to the next project. Because the content designer should be a full partner in the design process, hiring a content designer should shift ownership of the user experience from one design person, like as in this model, to a design team. That team should include the designer, content designer, ideally a researcher, and maybe other folks as well. Like at Indeed, we had front-end UX developers on the team as well. This shift in ownership is a big change because many UX designers learned early on from the early hiring habits of startups that I mentioned before that they're the owners of the experience, and they've always worked that way. As a manager, I've hired several content designers. At first, I assumed that just putting the content designer on a team would position them for success because they're so smart. Content designers are always really smart people, so they would figure it out. But a few months in, occasionally I would notice someone was struggling, and that I eventually realized this was my fault. Despite my efforts during the hiring process to clarify job duties, I hadn't been clear enough with the team that how they needed to include this person, so they didn't include them in important meetings and decisions. Talking to the team before hiring a content designer and clarifying your expectations about how the design process will change is important to do upfront. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. First, I want to talk about bias, though, in hiring, because you'll see this a lot. You want to avoid bias in hiring, but bias has ways of creeping into the process despite your intentions. So what I would recommend is don't use snap judgments to rule people out. I once talked to a hiring manager who said he wouldn't hire someone who wore a suit to the interview because that candidate wouldn't fit into the casual culture of the company. So I thought that was pretty unreasonable, because how many qualified candidates are you going to pass up because they can't read your mind about what you think the dress code should be? It's by far easier to make a snap judgment and use it to generalize about the candidate's future performance than it is to carefully assess skills and experience. But it's a huge mistake in hiring, and it's kind of a recipe for bringing your bias into the process. When reviewing candidates, you aren't looking for a certain kind of person. So don't label people based on what you think they are, like she's more of a marketer, or he's not really leader material, or what they have, like a degree or experience at a specific company. Thinking in these ways is another way of unleashing unconscious bias. Looking at the candidate's past actions, their specific skills and experience, is far more helpful than looking at attributes. Hiring expert Lou Adler notes, if it can be proven during the interview that a candidate has successfully handled similar work, it's clear the person has all the skills and experiences necessary. And similar work doesn't necessarily mean the exact same task. Can the candidate with a journalism background show how she carefully researched her sources while writing an article? Those research skills and sort of like focus on data are directly transferable, in my view, to content design, given the candidate is motivated to make the transition. So there is a concept of transferable skills and experience as well. To hire the right content designer, you need to understand what your organization needs them to do. Then you use this information to create a performance-focused job description, also called a performance profile. And the idea of the performance profile was developed by Lou Adler. It's also put out by Jared Spool and others in UX. This allows you to hire a candidate who will be as successful on their 1-year anniversary as they were in the interview, increasing the likelihood that you, as their employer, and the team, the employee, and the team are all happy with the hire. So I want to show 2 methods that I use when hiring. The first is a hiring workshop with the team, and then the performance profile. So the hiring workshop. This is a collaborative method to bring the team into the hiring process. You may be the hiring manager, but in order to hire the right content designer, you need input from the team who'll spend most of their time working with them. What do they expect their future content design coworker to do? A lightweight hiring workshop can answer this question. The workshop doesn't need to be time consuming. In less than an hour, you can glean insights from the team that can set you up to avoid interview chaos and hire a winning candidate. So the idea is to get the team together and get them to describe what the work will be like. First, explain the purpose of the meeting. To come to an agreement about what the content designer will be expected to accomplish in their first year. Then set a timer for 5 minutes. Have each team member write down on a sticky note, or you can do it virtually too, one task that the content designer should have completed a year from now. It can be general, like collaborate with research, but your goal is to get to specifics, like work with the researcher to identify the questions we need to answer, help with writing study plans, and participate in user interviews. If the tasks start out sounding general, you can work towards more specific ones in your discussion. When 5 minutes are up, it's time for affinity mapping. Have each person read their task out loud to the rest of the group. Group the stickies by topic as people read. Discuss any surprises. Does the product manager expect the content designer to write blog posts? Does the designer expect to write the copy herself and have the new hire proofread it? Get rid of any expectations that you, as the hiring manager, are sure you disagree with or that the team can agree on, while explaining that this task isn't in the content designer's scope of work. This is your first chance to set the working team's expectations of the new content designer. You can be diplomatic but clear when you identify expectations that are clearly not appropriate. Your group will come up with a lot of suitable tasks that everyone can agree on. Then you vote, set a timer for 5 minutes, let them vote for the tasks that they think are the most important. And then you're done. Explain to the team that you'll use the results of the workshop to write the performance profile, and that you'll circulate it amongst the team for their review and approval. So after this, you can write something like this. This is a sample performance profile for a fictional company. So now that you have the output of the hiring workshop, it's up to you to write the job description or the performance profile. You don't want to write just any old boilerplate listing. You want one that compels the right content designer to apply because they understand what the job entails, while it also sets them up for success. The performance profile describes the work a person needs to do to be successful, not the skills and experiences required to do the work. So for example, you can see here that there are different groups of bullets. We have core content design tasks, which involves learning about a product and proposing related products, writing clear, usable content, working with stakeholders in different time zones, gathering feedback from sales and user research to identify opportunities to improve content, etc. And then there's also some standards-based work, understanding personas, creating voice and tone standards, creating and maintaining content guidelines, etc. When you interview the content designer, what I do is I take 3 or 4 of these bullets and I assign each person on the hiring panel those items to assess. So what they're looking for when they interview the content designer is skills and experience, past experience where they have done either this activity or something very similar and transferable. And exactly what that looks like is something that you can discuss with your panel. Okay, so now that we've looked at hiring, let's talk a little bit about how the content designer works with the rest of the team. What I have here is a collaborative design sprint plan is a little bit of an eye chart. So I'm going to put in the chat a link to it's a Google sheet actually that you can view, and you can make your own copy, do whatever you want with your copy of it if you find it helpful, or you can look at it. You can probably see it better if you open it up yourself. But I want to talk a little bit about this because the collaborative design sprint is a method that enables the content designer to be fully embedded in design production. So have you ever heard the quote, "Plans are worthless, but planning is everything"? You never execute a plan perfectly because unexpected circumstances will always arise. But the process of planning forces you to think about your work and how you do it, which is really valuable. Because your team's unique, your design collaboration will be unique. What I'm talking about here aims to provide you not with a rigid process or set of rules, but more of a planning toolkit and principles to help your team design more effectively, together with the wider design team. A lot of companies divide their work into time periods called sprints, which typically last 1 or 2 weeks. So let's look at a sprint plan for a hypothetical design team. Even though your sprint won't look exactly like this one, seeing the example might help you or give you some ideas to add to your planning process. So if you can see my little spreadsheet here, in the very top little row, I have pre-production. Pre-production is my catch-all term for the activities that need to be done before the design sprint. So if you use a double diamond process, that would be the first diamond. It's where you're diverging, exploring, gathering data, and that type of thing. So I think of the design sprint as the production phase, and the pre-production phase is sort of the first diamond that happens before production. During the pre-production phase, the team creates a list of projects that have either been requested by stakeholders, like a product manager, or suggested by the team themselves. They discuss requirements for their projects with the PM, they do foundational research and design explorations. The team uses a quarterly planning meeting to estimate and prioritize the projects into sprints. So pre-production, one of the activities is actually like setting up, organizing, and planning the sprints and when they're going to happen. That way, the team can open each biweekly sprint planning meeting with a list of tasks ready to go. So this biweekly meeting is sort of like day one, the first white square here, is a gathering of the entire multidisciplinary design team, where members discuss their assignments for the week. The UX design manager who facilitates the meeting can ask a couple questions, or the manager, whoever facilitates the meeting, can ask, who do you need to collaborate with on this? And do you have the working sessions planned with them? This planning meeting is a perfect opportunity to ensure that no one goes into a cave to design something alone and then come out later and ask for feedback, aka content, from their teammates. Your team should be ideally conducting frequent working sessions throughout the sprint, and sprint planning is a time to put those meetings on the calendar. Then we have daily stand-ups, which I have from like day 2 to day 9 of the sprint. I would say resist the temptation for the team to just meet once a week, because not talking to each other for a week leaves each member in the dark about what everyone else is doing day to day. But holding a brief daily design stand-up helps them keep up with each other. For example, if the content designer hears the designer give an update about a design that she's working on, the content designer can say, "Can I see it?" or "Do you need help?" These exchanges result in a more collaborative process and better designs. Some people on the team might not like daily stand-ups, but that's too bad. Hold them anyway. I find them to be really, really helpful. Preliminary review with engineering. So I highly recommend bringing engineering, at least giving them some visibility into early design concepts, because that makes design concepts better and easier to build. Engineers bring their expertise that allows them to contribute valuable ideas because they understand emerging technologies and what's possible, or they can warn the design team about a solution that'll be prohibitively difficult or time-consuming to build. We have working sessions a couple times a week. There's one here on day 2. And then, let's see. I have one in week 2 as well. I'm not finding it right now, but I highly recommend regular working sessions. After taking some solo time on day 1 of the sprint, each member of the design team can go right into a working session on day 2. The content designer can bring a draft of content into this meeting. So the visual designer or the UX designer can use that as a foundation to create a concept, and the team can iterate from there. The content won't be final, but it will be real content, so you can avoid at least using placeholder lorem ipsum text. I like to have at least 2 working sessions a week to iterate on concepts together as a team. At the beginning of the sprint, the concepts start as more low fidelity wireframes, and then at the end, they're more polished Figma mockups. So design reviews. A couple times during the sprint, meet to share designs in progress with the stakeholder, which is usually a product manager, and get feedback. But let's back up. Before showing the PM the designs, the team should always meet in an internal design review to agree on what they're going to show. The team should know they should never show the stakeholder a design that only some members have seen. So I know that you all have been in a design review and you've seen content that you've never seen before, and people are looking at you going, "Did you write this?" And you're like, "No, I didn't." So the internal review helps to avoid that problem. If I never have that happen again, I would be so happy. All right, so usability testing. If you have a researcher, this is an aggressive schedule, by the way. I have worked in the schedule before. It was challenging, but it was really great to be able to iterate quickly together as a team, and it's kind of like the ideal scenario. Um, I recognize that it's difficult, but if you can, it's really a great process. If you have a researcher, let them lead the effort to get the concept in front of real users for feedback really quickly. The rest of the team can give input on what questions they'd like answered and observe the research sessions and help the researcher as needed. Afterward, the team can talk about what they saw and decide what changes need to be made before the next usability test. Stakeholders and engineers can observe too, by the way. In this way, the team tests through the design throughout the sprint until they arrive at a design that's usable enough to build. Then handoff to engineering happens at the end. There are build reviews in the following, within the following like sprint or a couple weeks. After the developers build the design team reviews the build. The engineering team has QA, of course, and they review the design for accuracy, but it's still helpful for the design team to review the build as well. We have UX designers and content designers doing QA, and everybody always finds something different. So I think it's really worthwhile for everyone to do QA. And then team retros. Team retros don't have to be long or formal. You can run a quick, casual one at the end of each sprint. If things get too hectic, then at least make sure to do one monthly or quarterly at a minimum. You gather the team and have everyone write down, I do what they liked, loathed, and longed for, but some people do like rose, thorn, bud. There's different ways of saying it, but it's essentially those 3 categories. What went well, what went poorly, or what did they wish had happened? To keep everyone on topic, remind them to focus on what happened and not who's to blame for any issues. Like I said, your schedule will be different from this one. That's okay. The important thing is to make sure that your team is doing some of these activities as much as possible and that they're communicating throughout the sprint. Okay, so now that we've talked about how the team works together, I want to talk a little bit about team structure because I think this is fascinating and it has a huge impact on how we work. As you hire your team's first content designers, it's time to consider what type of organizational structure they'll work within. You have 3 primary options for structuring your content design team: the team of one, the centralized team, and the decentralized team. I've worked in all 3, and as with most things, it depends. To understand which one is best kind of depends on the situation. Each has pros and cons, and the structure that makes the most sense at one point might not make sense a year later. So let's take a closer look at each of these structures. First, the team of one. Being a team of one is tough, but it's exciting. So what's difficult about it? Well, the lone content designer is left out of a lot of meetings because aside from those people that hired them, almost no one understands what the content designer does well enough to know when to include them. The lone content designer is stretched thin, covering multiple projects at once. This may result in lower quality designs being shipped. The lone content designer wants to help everyone, but just can't. She gets so many different requests from product teams with different goals and leaders that unless the organization has established very clear priorities, the onus is on that content designer to prioritize her own work and set boundaries, which is really a lot when they're trying to get up and running, understand the products, then also to prioritize the work is really a lot. What's exciting about it? She's a pioneer, educating her peers about how important content is. There's nothing quite like seeing a coworker finally get that yes, content design is a discipline and you can't build a successful product without it. She can clearly see how content design will help the company succeed. It's almost impossible not to get a vision for the future content design team and the impact that they could have. So I think that's really fun and exciting. But at some point, design leaders see that they have way more design projects than content designers to support them. If they're fortunate enough to get the hiring budget approved, they can hire more content designers. If the first content design hire is interested in taking a management role, this second wave of content designers might report to them. This results in a centralized team structure. As the team continues to grow, it might look something like this. So in this case, the manager has like 6 direct reports sitting on 6 different product teams. Oh, my numbers are all messed up. Just ignore the numbers. Those are 6 teams. The centralized team structure has a few important benefits. A central content design manager can enforce consistent hiring standards for all the new content design hires. The central manager can see content design needs across the organization. So she can move content people to the highest priority projects and advocate for hiring where it's needed. A central team gives content designers a ready-made community of practice. They can work together to do important things like advocate for the discipline and agree on content standards. A content community is a huge morale booster, allowing content designers to share problems, wins, and ideas amongst themselves. They feel less alone when they're part of a team of like-minded practitioners. New content designers report to someone who understands their craft, a fellow content designer. Content practitioners, especially early career ones, want craft mentorship, and a content designer is better equipped than a manager from a visual design background to provide that mentorship. Eventually, however, there are a few downsides that appear. One is a limited career path. Centralized content design teams report to a content design manager or director. After that, it's not quite clear where the path leads. Some organizations won't promote a content design leader into a generalist design leader role because they still have sort of a visual first mindset. If that's the case, content design leaders can hit a ceiling. Another problem is limited influence over product decisions. By default, the UX manager, not the content design manager, is typically the product manager's main point of contact when it comes to design questions. At the same time, the content design manager's team is spread across several product areas, unlike the UX manager's team, who are dedicated to one product area typically. That makes it difficult for the content design manager to gain subject matter expertise in any one product. This further insulates her from product decisions and makes it more difficult to advocate for direct reports to be sufficiently involved in the design process. So then at some point, as a centralized content design manager, they may wish that they had the same scope as their peer UX design manager. In my case, this happened, and because we had more UX managers than content design managers, each UX manager covered just one product. This allowed the design managers to really understand the product and cultivate a close relationship with their respective product manager. As a result, my design manager peers were able to exercise more influence over product strategy and vision than I was able to do. So my manager and I wondered, well, what if each product's UX team was managed by one cross-functional UX manager? And what if I was one of those UX managers? Not only would it solve the problem of me as the content design manager being isolated from product decisions, it would also allow me to hold designers and content designers accountable for collaborating effectively. So I wouldn't have any more one-on-ones where I'm trying to strategize with the content designer how to get them into the kickoff, I would directly be able to influence the collaboration and the design process. Decentralizing the team can be an effective step in evolving the content design team's structure and influence because it gives PMs one less manager to work with, so they no longer have to coordinate with both a UX manager and a content design manager. It provides a career path for content designers all the way through the UX leadership levels or the design leadership. It sends the message that content design really is a design function, and it provides one manager who can hold both design and content design accountable for the process and outcomes. This single cross-functional manager is better positioned to facilitate a truly collaborative design process from start to finish. But a decentralized team also has downsides. Managers will naturally be stronger in one craft than another. For example, visual design more than content. So they may struggle to coach all their direct reports equally. As we saw, craft mentorship is really important. This issue, I think, can be mitigated by having communities of practice for each discipline, one for design and one for content design. There's also going to be fewer manager openings, though. While this structure opens up a more robust vertical career path for content designers, the role of the content design manager is essentially eliminated, leaving fewer manager roles available horizontally for content designers to move into. Because no central content design manager has visibility across the organization, it's also much more difficult to spot emerging needs and move content designers from one team to another to meet those needs. So I've told this story as sort of a progression from team of one to centralized to decentralized team. But of course, reality is messier than that. I worked for a decentralized team that went back to a centralized structure because they preferred that. And then some centralized teams never decentralize, they stay centralized. So it's really up to you and your leaders and your team to determine the best structure for your organization. Also, Lauren Pope just did an in-depth study of different team structures, and she goes into a lot more detail than I have time to do tonight. And I'm going to post a link to this article in case you're really interested in team structures and you want to read more, because she has some unique data and perspectives that you'll want to consider if you're interested in this topic. Cool. Okay. So I want to take a minute to talk about AI just because I think it's really interesting and kind of important for us as content designers to sort of think about. But ever since I wrote about this a few months ago, everything has changed. Everything changes like every 2 weeks. And a lot more of you are working with AI now, and a lot of you have probably more advanced practice in terms of integrating content design into the design process for AI products, as well as integrating AI into your content design process. So I'm going to share a case study with you of a friend of mine who works on an LLM as a content designer. And I think it's really interesting, and I think it shows us where we can go as a discipline. But I'm also interested to hear your experiences in the comments of how you're working with AI and how content design is informing the design of actual language models. So, okay. AI-based products, I'm talking about AI-based products here. So digital products that integrate a language model of some type. These are not traditional or typical software products, so they call for a new and different content design process. Rebecca Wynn works as a lead content designer for Indeed, which is a job website hiring platform. They have a Seattle office, so you may know about them. Unlike an LLM like ChatGPT, which is expected to output content about any topic, the language model Rebecca works with only needs to be good at one task, explaining why Indeed is matching a job seeker with a particular job, or it may suggest a candidate to an employer. So doing this requires the model to read language, parsing through lots of text to find matches, and at the same time, the model generates reasons a job seeker should apply to a specific job. Because the model writes the content, Rebecca's job is different from a traditional content design role. She says, having the right process is key. It's different from how we operated before, because we had an idea of the ideal content and would then design it. Now we're asking the LLM to do that. So our job shifts to preparing what the model needs to generate content, so training data, then evaluating how successful it was at content creation. So Rebecca does the pre-work, the LLM writes the content, and Rebecca does post-work to evaluate the output and course correct the LLM as needed. Iterating on prompt instructions and sample content using trial and error to get closer and closer to the right result is a huge part of her job. One of Rebecca's coworkers characterized her role as that of a teacher, while the LLM is the student. When she gets questions about why a content designer is needed to create an LLM-based product, Rebecca says, content designers mitigate risks in LLM content by catching subtle instances of toxicity and bias and ensuring model content is safe, on brand, and aligned with content guidelines. LLMs are designed to output content. Who better to direct, design, and evaluate a content product than a content designer? To Rebecca and her team, it's obvious that content designers should be the ones to help the model generate usable content. And this process, Rebecca says, works. So she says she's very confident in their content design driven LLM development process because they have increased engagement, revenue, and profit for the company, and their team has quadrupled in size. Now, content design for AI products, I think, is kind of just emerging and in its infancy, even though some of you are probably already doing it. Content designers like Rebecca are at the forefront of this work, creating processes and best practices for future teams to follow. And what I think is really intriguing about this is that this is an example of a content-led design process where content design really takes the lead because everyone understands that the product is made primarily out of content. So in the future, perhaps content-led processes will become the norm for teams designing both types of products, traditional and LLM-based. This is what I think is really interesting and what I'd like to see. Because with content at the center of the design process, I think teams stand a much better chance of creating experiences people can use and even enjoy. Okay, so that's what I have. And let's go to Q&A. I'll turn it back over to you, Paula.
Great, thank you. And we do have some questions. I'm going to ask my colleague Tony to queue those up for you, and we can get some conversation going here.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Yeah, and thank you for the slides and the great information. We've got a couple of questions. If anyone else has any additional questions, please drop them in the chat. Start with Daphne as a question. You might be a content designer working on a team where people know what you do and some people don't know what you do. How do you go about establishing credibility without making establishing credibility your only job?
That's a good question. I would love to also hear if other folks have thoughts about this. So actually, one thing that I didn't have time to go into was getting buy-in from leadership, because it's so hard to establish credibility if you're doing it from the bottom up, really. And the more top-down your organization is, I'm learning that some companies are really top-down, then it makes it like extra hard to try to establish credibility from the bottom up and like sort of push, advocate for yourself and for the practice without having sponsorship and an ally who's like at the VP or director level. So in that step, when you're talking about hiring a team or hiring a content designer, it's super helpful and important if you can get those people on your side. Like you need an ally, someone, like it might just be one person at that level who can advocate for you. And I don't know if this is like a cheat answer, Daphne, because of course everything's better if you can just get like a C-level to advocate for you. But I think it's kind of really important and crucial for content designers, because if we don't, then we do end up spending so much of our time just advocating for, being invited to the kickoff, and that's not a really great use of time. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. Next question comes from Scott. Content designers often are asked to maybe do work that isn't as strategic as it could be, like wordsmithing a deck or taking them away from strategic work. Do your teams have gating mechanisms to assess incoming requests, declining work that won't create meaningful impact?
Yeah, so you're talking about like we have too many requests, and we're prioritizing the incoming request based on like how strategic is it and how much of an impact is it going to have? Is that what you're
I
suggesting?
think so. And are you
Yeah.
able to say no?
Are you able to say no? I think you can always say no. So I'm a big fan of saying no in theory. I'm not great at it in practice. I'll just be honest with you. But I do think it's a great tool. I think I'm getting better. Right now, the team that I'm on, I'm really fortunate because it's actually, believe it or not, after I wrote this book saying nobody does content design the right way because nobody works content first, I got moved over to a team that actually works content first. So I was wrong. There are teams out there doing it, a way that I would consider like pretty close to ideal, like my current team. And on my current team, we have capacity, so we don't actually have to do this. So I'm really lucky. But can you say no? I think if you have that ally, you're going to have a better chance saying no. And then I think in the other question was about prioritizing based on um, strategic opportunity. I think that's a really smart way to do it as well. I think that's a great idea. I don't have to do that right now, so I'm kind of in a privileged position. But I think you can, and I think you should, and I support you.
Excellent. Thank you. One more question from Daphne. Across your varied IC and manager roles, what about content design still lights you up? What surprises you?
I do this because I think it's really cool that we can actually like impact someone's day. Like if someone's trying to get something done, um, right now in my job, people are trying to send money to each other. We can make that harder, or we can make it easier. And it's really exciting to me that we get an opportunity to make something easier for someone that maybe just makes their day a little bit better or easier. I once saw a talk by a content designer who worked for the government. I think it was the US government. And they worked on um, the immigration process and helping people understand and navigate that process. And that kind of blew my mind because that's so impactful for people in their lives, just understanding the next steps, where they are and what they need to do. So it's really motivating for me. Like that type of user impact is super motivating. So yeah. And I would love to know from you too, Daphne, if you want to put it in the comments, or anyone, what you enjoy about content strategy and content design as well.
I think Polly had some questions as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, well, while everyone is, kind of thinking about what they want to share about what they love about their jobs or what they do. So Melanie, so one of the things about being, involved in the meetup is, obviously we have a lot of contact with a lot of folks in the community, and there, as everyone I think knows, there've been a lot of layoffs and a lot of people who are job hunting, and sometimes for kind of extended periods of time, and that's obviously a really difficult situation to be in. So as a hiring manager, I'm wondering if there's anything you'd be willing to share, that advice or things that you look for. Are there things like we've talked a couple of times about people putting together things like portfolios. Just what do you like to see someone come to an interview sort of prepared to do, or what kind of materials are helpful when you're hiring?
Yeah, so you can probably look at like how I talk about performance-based hiring and see my approach. I mean, I will say like I can talk about my approach. I think that other hiring managers may use other approaches. So, if someone is more inclined to like I've seen people talk about, I was talking to this candidate and I just vibed with them, so I hired them. I mean, there are hiring managers out there who do that, so I can't really help you with those hiring managers. But for someone like me who's looking from a performance-based lens, I really would love to see some of the work that you've done and understand how you did it. And people always say this, but it's really true. We want to see the thinking and the process that went into the output. So your ideal story that you can tell is, you worked on a problem, you did a certain number of things, and then there was an outcome. And the holy grail is like a metric or something like that. But it doesn't have to be you saved the company or like you quadrupled profits or anything like that. I mean, that's great if you did. But like I have a case study in my portfolio that I don't think it actually, I don't know if it actually got built, but we did design a better solution and it did test better than the existing solution. So I can say, oh, this like 92% of users were more successful with our solution than with the previous solution. So having results is really helpful. But I want to go back to the process. Understanding, I really want to see, are you someone who uses data and evidence and research to make decisions? That's a really big key for me. Even if you don't have the privilege of working with a dedicated researcher or a dedicated research team, because not all of us can do that, understanding that you have gotten data from somewhere, from secondary research that you did, from a competitive audit, from an internal audit, and you use that data and that research to make a design decision and to like put forth a solution to the problem, that's really helpful. And it's surprising because oftentimes in the stories that I see, that step is missing or those steps are missing, and it might just be like, here's a thing that I made, which is good to see, but without knowing the process that got you there, I don't know if I don't know if you have the experience to easily fit into this or easily like add to my team where you're going to be expected to contribute to research and make decisions based on research. So that's really helpful if you can show that. It's a really tough market, super tough market out there. So yeah, I hope everybody has amazing jobs and gets amazing jobs.
Yes, seconding that. All right. Well, if there are any other questions, please, drop something in the chat. Otherwise, we will thank Melanie for her time tonight. We appreciate, again, especially because we know that it's late for her and it's a school night. So we appreciate you staying up to talk with us, Melanie. This has been really terrific. We've had lots of good conversation in the chat, and we will, as we've mentioned, when we have the video ready, we will share that. So watch all of those places that I mentioned up front: our Slack channel, the Meetup site itself, our website, LinkedIn. Any of those, we'll post the video there. And we'd love to, of course, see you at one of our upcoming events. Thanks for joining, and good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.